Have you ever noticed how small businesses try to manage their employees exactly like massive corporations, but it like almost always goes totally sideways?
Oh, yeah, constantly.
Right. You'll see this tiny 30-person startup suddenly rolling out, a 90-page employee handbook, or they try implementing this incredibly complex corporate style performance review matrix.
And it just feels completely out of place.
Exactly. It's totally out of place. And usually, I mean, it ends up creating way more friction than it actually resolves.
Well, it is a trap that catches, almost every growing business because small companies look at the market, they see what the global multinationals are doing, and they just assume that represents the objective right way to handle human resources.
Like, oh, Google does it this way, so we have to do it this way.
Right. Exactly. So they try to import this massive corporate infrastructure into an environment that operates under, well, fundamentally different physical and social rules.
And that reality is exactly what we're exploring today. We are doing a deep dive into this really fascinating academic article by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover. It's called Navigating Institutional Complexity: How Context Shapes Talent Management Implementation in Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises.
Which is a very long title for a really practical problem.
It really is. But the mission of today's deep dive is to basically figure out why small and medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs, struggle so much with talent management. And, spoiler alert for you listening, it is not just because they have smaller budgets than the Fortune 500.
Right, because if the struggle simply came down to dollars and cents, the solutions would be super
So
straightforward.
scale it down, right?
Exactly. You would just scale down the corporate practices proportionally. But this research, which it closely examines 25 French SMEs alongside some broader European comparative data, it actually uncovers a web of invisible forces that completely dictate how these businesses can actually operate.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the paper talks about a massive blind spot in how we typically view human resources in smaller companies. So what is that blind spot, mechanically speaking?
What's fascinating here is that historically, both researchers and business consultants have treated SME talent management failures as, well, basically a lack of competence or execution.
Like an owner just doesn't get it.
Right. The standard assumption is that the owner-manager just doesn't know what they're doing. Or, they're too busy putting out fires to care about HR.
Wow, okay.
But Dr. Westover's research demonstrates that these businesses are actually trapped by what sociologists call institutional logics.
Institutional logics, got it.
Yeah, these are deep societal rules, cultural expectations, and regulatory frameworks that define what is considered acceptable behavior in any given environment.
Oh, I see.
So SMEs aren't failing because they lack skills. They are caught in this crazy high-wire act, trying desperately to balance completely contradictory external pressures.
That has to be such a huge relief to hear for anyone out there trying to run a smaller organization. I mean, whether you run a tight-knit team or you work at a startup or you just want to understand the hidden forces shaping your own workplace, this deep dive will completely change how you view office dynamics.
It really reframes everything.
It does. But before we get into the invisible institutional pressures from the outside world, we first need to establish what makes the internal environment of an SME so unique in the first place.
Right. We have to look at the physical and structural reality of the company itself. The paper utilizes a model by Harney and colleagues called the recipe framework.
The recipe framework, okay.
Yeah, it outlines the specific, unavoidable constraints of operating an SME. The acronym covers resource constraints, environmental vulnerability, concentrated control, informality, proximity relations, and employee dynamics.
Okay, wait. That is quite the academic mouthful. When you take all those terms.
That's a lot, I know.
Yeah, like environmental vulnerability, concentrated control. What does that actually look like for the people working on the shop floor or sitting in the office?
Let's zero in on just one of those elements to illustrate the difference. Let's look at proximity.
Okay, proximity.
Think about a sprawling multinational corporation. The workforce is physically and structurally spread out, right?
Sure. Thousands of people across multiple states or countries?
Exactly. So if management decides to send, say, 3 high-potential middle managers from the marketing department to a specialized, highly expensive leadership retreat, almost nobody in the broader company notices.
Right. It just happens quietly.
Yes. The decision is swallowed up by the sheer scale of the organization. But in a 30-person firm, that level of special treatment is immediately visible.
Oh, wow. Yeah, of course it is.
The other 27 employees are sitting in the exact same open plan office. Or they're working on the exact same warehouse floor. They see exactly who got selected, and more importantly, they immediately recognize that they were excluded.
That totally makes sense. It makes me think of the difference between a massive luxury cruise ship and a small lifeboat.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, managing talent in a multinational is, it's like steering that cruise ship. The employees or passengers spread across a dozen different decks. The folks dining in first class are in a completely different room than the economy passengers, and they, like, rarely even cross paths.
Right, they have no idea what the other is eating.
Exactly. But an SME is like a small lifeboat. Every
Uh-huh.
single move someone makes rocks the boat. Everyone is sitting shoulder to shoulder, and everyone sees exactly who just got handed the extra rations.
That analogy perfectly visualizes the structural tension. In that lifeboat, every decision the captain makes is heavily scrutinized by the crew.
Yeah.
But the research points out something crucial here. Even within this physical reality, SMEs facing the exact same constraints will behave very differently.
Wait, really? Why is that?
Well, one 30-person company might adopt a deeply egalitarian culture where everyone gets the exact same training, while another might ruthlessly single out top performers and shower them with perks.
Even though they're the same size.
Exactly. And the reason for the difference brings us back to those institutional logics, the invisible rules of the game dictating how the lifeboat is allowed to be governed.
Okay, so let's look at the first big wave hitting that lifeboat. The paper refers to this as the pressure of the government, or state logic.
Yes. State logic operates on the principles of bureaucratic procedure, public welfare, and regulatory compliance. The researchers focus heavily on the French context to illustrate this.
Right, they look at national mandates.
Yeah, things like the Loi El Khomri and mandatory training levies like the CPF, which is essentially a state-regulated personal training account for every single employee.
Got it.
The overarching goal of these laws is employee protection. They are designed to ensure that employment is a socially safeguarded status, shielding workers from arbitrary corporate decisions.
And just a quick note for you listening, we are maintaining strict political neutrality as we talk through this. We aren't endorsing or condemning these specific labor laws or European models at all.
Right, absolutely.
We are simply unpacking the text's findings regarding how these rigid employment structures mechanically alter the day-to-day operations of a small business. So, mechanically, what happens?
Mechanically, what these regulations do is create intense procedural friction. Take dismissal procedures in France, for example. Firing an underperforming employee requires extensive, legally mandated documentation.
Lots of paperwork.
Tons of it, plus formal consultation periods and highly specific procedural steps. Now, a large corporation has an entire in-house legal department dedicated to managing that friction.
Right. But an SME?
An SME has zero in-house legal counsel.
None. The text actually highlights a quote from a frustrated HR manager that really brings this to life. They explain that when they need to let someone go, even for entirely valid performance reasons, they have to hire an external lawyer.
Which is incredibly expensive.
Right. The consulting fees alone are so prohibitive that the company simply chooses to keep the underperformer on the payroll much longer than they should.
And that is state logic forcing a structural change. It transforms a standard talent management decision into a highly regulated, expensive legal hazard.
So the business just freezes.
Basically, small businesses end up internalizing this legal framework as an existential risk. However, the study reveals that SMEs are not passive victims in this scenario. They actually exercise their own agency.
How so?
By deploying a tactic that blends minimal formal compliance with extensive informal workarounds.
Oh, I love this part. It is basically like a local restaurant running a secret menu.
Yes, exactly like that.
On paper, when the health inspector, or, in this case, the state regulatory body comes around, the restaurant serves exactly what is legally mandated. Every single compliance box is checked.
Looking perfect for the state.
Right. But to actually survive, stay profitable, and pivot quickly, they operate a completely informal, off-the-books system in the back room.
Because they have to.
Exactly. They realize they cannot afford the legal risk of permanently hiring someone they might need to fire later, so they lean heavily on temporary workers or short-term contracts.
Yep.
And since their training budgets are drained by the mandatory state levies, they run undocumented mentoring programs instead of, formal leadership courses.
The secret menu strategy allows them to survive the immediate regulatory pressure, but it generates a massive long-term problem.
Which is?
The researchers label this the flexibility security tension. By relying on a revolving door of temporary workers to maintain agility, The SME completely sabotages its ability to build deep institutional knowledge.
Because everyone is leaving every few months.
Exactly. You cannot develop specialized skills or long-term operational excellence when half your workforce is temporary.
And the permanent employees left on the lifeboat see this constant churn of temps, which destroys their own sense of psychological safety.
Right.
The paper quotes a manager who says they end up with compliance but absolutely no commitment. Like, they successfully check all the state's boxes, but the company culture slowly bleeds out.
And that brings us to the second major institutional pressure, which comes not from the government, but from the immediate community.
Okay, the community.
Yeah. If the state forces the SME to run a secret menu to stay agile, local cultural norms force them to hide their absolute best ingredients. The researchers call this union logic.
I found this section so fascinating because it deals so much with local reputation. What does union logic actually demand from a business?
It demands egalitarianism and collective protection above all else. In France, this stems from deeply rooted Republican values of absolute equal opportunity.
And we see this elsewhere too, right?
Oh, definitely. You see similar dynamics with works councils in Germany or localized unions in Spain. Under this logic, any attempt by management to identify a high-potential employee and offer them exclusive training is viewed with deep, deep suspicion.
It's not seen as an investment in the company's future.
No, not at all. It is seen as blatant favoritism and a moral violation of workplace solidarity.
Because we are still in that small lifeboat. If the captain hands one specific sailor a significantly better oar and extra water, the rest of the crew feels instantly betrayed.
Exactly.
The local town culture essentially expects the business to treat everyone exactly the same, regardless of their output. So how on earth does an SME navigate that? I mean, they clearly need to develop their top performers to grow the business.
They resort to a tactic called symbolic adherence.
Symbolic adherence.
Yes, they construct highly collaborative, egalitarian narratives for public consumption. In practice, this means an SME will formally announce a universal training initiative that is explicitly open to every single employee, from the top performer down to the newest hire.
So it looks totally fair on paper.
Right. On the surface, it satisfies the union's demand for total equality. But quietly, hidden inside the structure of that generic program, management is funneling specialized coaching and advanced career opportunities exclusively to their elite talent.
Okay, I have to push back here on behalf of anyone who has ever tried to run a team.
Go for it.
If an SME is forced to water down its training programs just to look acceptable to the local community, doesn't that inherently destroy the company's ability to actually get things done? Like, how do you grow a competitive business if you are terrified to publicly reward excellence?
Well, this raises an important question, and it highlights the exact paradox the researchers uncovered. They define this as the effectiveness-legitimacy bind.
Effectiveness versus legitimacy.
Exactly. Effectiveness requires sharp differentiation. You must invest disproportionately in your top performers to drive innovation and revenue. But legitimacy, in the eyes of the local union or community, requires demonstrating an unwavering commitment to absolute equality.
Oh.
Yeah. In an SME facing strong union logic, you cannot pursue one goal without completely violating the other.
Because if they openly champion their rock star employees, the local union causes disruptions, their reputation in a small town tanks, and suddenly no one wants to apply for a job there anyway.
Right? Their social legitimacy evaporates. So to avoid this, they attempt to satisfy both demands through those hidden symbolic programs. And the human cost is actually tragic.
What happens?
The paper features a really poignant observation from an SME leader who admitted that because they design everything for universal access, their brightest employees are chronically under-challenged.
Bored out of their minds.
Exactly. While their weakest employees are completely overwhelmed by the material, they are terrified of appearing elitist, so they aim for the lowest common denominator. The text brilliantly summarizes this as designing for everyone, serving no one.
That sounds completely paralyzing. So the SME is dodging state bureaucracy with a secret menu, and they are hiding their top performers behind fake universal programs to appease the local culture.
Yep.
But they still exist in a capitalist market. They have to actually compete for talent against massive multinational corporations who don't have to hide their resources. How do they do that?
That is a third invisible pressure, market logic. This logic values efficiency, competitiveness, and above all, market credibility. The paper highlights a severe structural disadvantage here called spatial inequality, or geographic marginalization.
Meaning the talent naturally drains away from the small towns where these SMEs are actually located.
Exactly. The researchers use the rural region of La Cruz in France as an example. Young, ambitious talent naturally flows toward major metropolitan hubs like Paris or Lyon, drawn by higher salaries and, cultural amenities.
Sure, they want the big city life.
Right, and the rural SMEs lack the visibility and the industry prestige of the big city firms. They suffer from a massive legitimacy deficit. Candidates simply do not view them as serious places to build a lucrative career.
So how do they fight back?
To combat this deficit and signal credibility to the broader market, SMEs resort to imitation.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. They start pretending to be something they completely aren't.
Oh.
The study observes these tiny companies suddenly demanding advanced, specialized university diplomas for entry-level roles that absolutely do not require them, simply because that is the standard a multinational would demand.
Exactly.
They start using bloated corporate job titles or rolling out massive, highly complex competency frameworks they read about in a business magazine, even though their entire workforce could literally fit in a single conference room.
Right. They adopt the complex vocabulary of a multinational corporation without possessing any of the actual infrastructure. They focus heavily on cost reduction, treating human capital as an expense to be minimized, while simultaneously copying the highly visible bureaucratic practices of large firms to appear professional to the outside world.
It is the equivalent of showing up to a job interview wearing a counterfeit designer suit.
That is a great way to put it.
From 50 feet away, the SME looks like a highly sophisticated, legitimate corporate player. The prospective candidate sees the impressive job title and the rigid competency framework and assumes they're joining a massive operation.
But then they start the job.
Right. Once the employee actually accepts the job and walks through the door, they realize the infrastructure is entirely an illusion. The suit immediately falls apart at the seams.
That metaphor perfectly encapsulates the researcher's concept of the authenticity-conformity tension. By bending over backwards to conform to corporate standards just to look legitimate, SMEs actively destroy their greatest inherent advantage.
Meaning their proximity.
Yes.
The fact that they're a small lifeboat. Their ability to be flexible, to pivot quickly, and to build deep, highly personalized relationships with their staff.
That is the core of it. Their authentic strength lies in tacit knowledge and relational judgment. A manager knowing exactly how a specific employee fits into the team dynamic or reading complex situations as they evolve on the floor.
But they throw that away.
Exactly. They abandon that nuanced approach to copy a rigid corporate checklist. And the fallout is severe. They end up hiring overqualified individuals who possess the fancy diplomas, but those employees quickly feel underutilized and entirely unmotivated by the actual day-to-day work.
Which leads to turnover.
Constant turnover. The SME becomes permanently trapped in a vicious cycle of high recruitment costs, profound employee dissatisfaction, and just people leaving.
Okay, we need to find a way out of this because the picture being painted is incredibly grim.
It sounds pretty rough, yeah.
We have the state logic forcing a flexibility security tension. We have the union logic creating an effectiveness legitimacy bind, and market logic creating an authenticity conformity tension. It sounds like small businesses are doomed to be counterfeit corporations forever. What is the actual path forward? Does the research offer a way to break this cycle?
The paper absolutely offers a way out. It identifies 3 forward-looking strategies or pillars for how SMEs can stop reacting defensively and start building genuine capability.
Okay, let's hear them.
The first pillar is institutional dialogue. Rather than hiding in the shadows with informal workarounds and secret menus, SMEs need to actively partner with larger entities to advocate for regulatory frameworks that actually accommodate their reality.
But how does a 30-person company actually get the government to listen to them?
Well, they cannot do it alone, which is why they leverage larger partners. The paper provides a brilliant example regarding Schneider Electric.
Okay, the big energy company.
Right. Schneider is a massive multinational corporation, but they rely heavily on a supply chain made up of tiny SMEs. Schneider realized that the crushing compliance burdens were threatening their suppliers' survival. So Schneider and the SMEs jointly approached regulators.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah. By aggregating their voices, they successfully negotiated modified, scaled-down reporting requirements. Another powerful example is from Germany, where IG Metall, the massive metalworkers union, actually partnered with local SME associations.
They partnered with the union.
Yes, Together, they co-designed skills programs that allowed companies to invest heavily in targeted talent without violating the union's baseline demand for universal opportunity.
That makes total sense. Instead of fighting the state and the union in isolation, you build strategic alliances to change the rules of the game.
Exactly.
That brings us to the second pillar. How do they tackle the market logic and the talent drain?
The second pillar involves adopting ecosystem approaches, specifically a concept known as talent co-opetition. Yeah,
Repetition.
cooperation and competition. This occurs when multiple SMEs within a specific geographic region agree to pool their financial resources to co-fund expensive training facilities, share highly specialized talent, or build joint employer branding campaigns.
Okay, let me put on my skeptical small business owner hat for a second.
Let's hear it.
The idea of talent co-opetition sounds incredibly risky. If I run a small manufacturing firm and I'm already struggling with a tiny budget, why on earth would I pool my money with the firm across the street? Mechanically, what stops me from paying for an engineer's training only to have the guy next door poach them for a slightly higher salary?
It is a completely natural fear, and it is the exact reason most SMEs hesitate. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the data proves that a collective ecosystem is the only way to reverse the talent drain. Yeah. The researchers point to France's pôle de compétitivité, or the highly successful industrial districts in northern Italy. In these regions, small firms co-fund technical schools. Mechanically, this works because an individual SME simply cannot offer the vertical career mobility of a multinational.
Right.
If you were a brilliant engineer in a 30-person firm, you will eventually hit a ceiling. When you hit that ceiling, you leave the region entirely.
You pack up and move to Paris or Lyon.
Exactly. But if 20 specialized SMEs in a region collaborate, that same engineer can move horizontally. They can transition from a design role at one firm to a production leadership role at the firm across the street.
Oh, wow.
The region itself becomes a magnet for top talent. Yes, employees might move between local competitors, but the overall pool of highly skilled labor in the town grows exponentially. Sharing the financial burden is the only viable way SMEs can provide the scale of career development that modern talent demands.
So you are essentially building a regional corporate ladder that spans across multiple different companies.
Yes, exactly.
That is brilliant. Okay, so we have alliances to change the rules and regional pooling to attract talent. What is the final pillar? How do they fix the internal culture?
The third pillar is transparent practices.
Mm.
This is the antidote to the secret menu. Rather than hiding your elite performers inside fake universal programs to appease egalitarian demands, the research suggests making your differentiation visible, procedural, and completely authentic.
How do you do that?
The study highlights two fascinating case studies here: Hare's platform organization model and the Mondragon Cooperative Network in Spain.
I'm not familiar with those. How do they actually manage to separate the top performers without causing a mutiny on the lifeboat?
It all comes down to democratic fairness. The Mondragon Network is a massive worker cooperative, so it is culturally deeply egalitarian. But they achieve necessary differentiation by allowing the employees themselves to vote on investment priorities and selection criteria for training.
Oh, so the workers decide.
Exactly. Or look at the Hare model, which breaks the company down into tiny, autonomous micro-enterprises. If an employee wants to lead a major new initiative, they have to publicly pitch their idea and convince their peers to join their team. It functions like an open, transparent market inside the company itself.
So instead of management secretly tapping someone on the shoulder in a dark room and handing them the extra rations, the process happens in broad daylight.
Right. It's totally visible.
Not everyone gets selected to lead, so the company still gets the effectiveness of differentiation. But because the rules for earning that spot are public, procedurally fair, and often decided by the workers themselves, the local union or community cannot accuse management of favoritism. The legitimacy is maintained.
Precisely. You do not have to hide your best ingredients if everyone in the kitchen agreed on the recipe for how they are used.
So, what does this all mean? If we zoom all the way out, it means that managing talent in a small or medium-sized enterprise isn't just about wishing you had a bigger budget. It is a complex, high-wire act of balancing rigid regulatory frameworks, community demands for fairness, and cutthroat market survival.
It really is.
And the companies that actually win in this space are the ones who stop trying to wear the counterfeit corporate suit, they stop hiding their practices, and they start actively collaborating with their local ecosystems to rewrite the rules entirely.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ultimate takeaway for you listening is this. The next time you interact with a small business and you see them make a seemingly illogical hiring decision or roll out an incredibly clunky policy, take a step back and look past the surface.
It's not just incompetence.
Exactly. Do not immediately assume the management team is incompetent. You are highly likely witnessing a group of people desperately trying to navigate massive, invisible institutional forces. They are doing everything they can to keep their lifeboat afloat while simultaneously trying to satisfy the demands of the state regulatory bodies, the expectations of their crew, and the harsh realities of the open ocean.
It is a tremendous, almost impossible balancing act, and it leaves me with a final thought for you to mull over. We have spent this entire deep dive talking about these rigid institutional logics, the strict state laws, the deep-rooted union expectations, the market pressures.
Right.
But the global landscape of work is changing incredibly fast. We are currently witnessing a massive shift toward independent contractors, fractional specialized work, and the decentralized gig economy. If the future of work is no longer tied to traditional employment structures, how will these rigid institutional logics adapt?
That's a great question.
Right. Will the state regulators and local unions eventually figure out a way to force the gig economy into these exact same paralyzing paradoxes? Or will small businesses finally be able to use this decentralized shift to rewrite the rules entirely and ditch the counterfeit corporate suits once and for all? Something to definitely think about. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden world of SMEs. We will catch you next time.